You weren't here yet. I'm hanging out with your wife, and Jody's telling me the story of her dad. I think it was her dad said that you abused little old ladies at the bridge club.
I don't think that was the terms. I mean, I'm not an evil person, but an impediment for me becoming a better player was I like to play poker too much at the table and try and steal from the opponents.
Yeah. I'm here with Mitch Dunitz. How long have you been playing bridge now?
Since roughly the Paleolithic age. I started at the age of 13. My older sister taught me, and then I started playing a lot. I was a poker player for a bit, and then I fell in love with bridge in college.
You were playing poker in college then?
I played poker a little bit, but several of my friends said, let's start playing this other game, this bridge game, and I just was mesmerized. I remember dealing out cards and putting them on my dorm room floor to look at squeeze positions and end play positions. I couldn't get enough of it. Absolutely was fascinated.
You went to what college again?
The University of Michigan, the team that loses every other year to Ohio State, but not recently.
I think there's a lot of people that came out of the University of Michigan that play bridge.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chuck Berger, Zeke Jabbour, Chuck Said, Ross Grable, a lot of talent, many people I've forgotten about here, a lot of my peers.
What was the bridge scene then at University of Michigan?
I was playing in my college dormitory primarily, and I would say that my group of friends, there's maybe 8 or so of us, were the ones that liked the game and were playing as much as we could, and we would go to a local duplicate. There weren't that many kids who were playing bridge at that time besides my peer group.
You were going to college in the 70s?
Yes, in the 70s. I'm not that old, thankfully.
You were just hanging out in your college dorm. I know, talking to Mark Itabashi, I think he was walking through the Union and saw a bunch of people playing a card game and asked about what it was, and that's how he fell into playing bridge.
Yeah, for me it was different because I already knew something about. I grew up in a family, we were card players. I knew lots of card games. I had learned to play bridge when I was 13.
Did you play euchre?
I also played euchre.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. But and many of my friends who understood the game of bridge a little bit, they did play euchre. Understanding the concept of taking tricks and trumps and all, that was part of it. But anyway, Mark got it by walking by. That's not so much what happened. In my group, there was just a few guys who said, this is a cool game, let's play. I said, oh, I already know how. Of course, I didn't really know how, but I thought I knew how. And we got a few books, like 5 Weeks to Winning Bridge, and Charles Gorin does this or that. We were creating our own conventions. I remember one silly convention we played for a few months was Red Suit Stamen over a no-trump. A no-trump, 2 clubs, you would only bid 2 diamonds or 2 hearts, depending whether you had 4 hearts. And maybe this was a marijuana-induced thing, but I don't know why we played that.
Okay, so you played at Michigan. And then you guys would just play in the dorm rooms and stuff like that, and occasionally went to a duplicate club.
We did, yeah, we did, in fact. And we started playing in tournaments, and that was like a whole new world. We were just mesmerized. I think I used that word before, but it was just this whole new counterculture of card players, and we fell in love.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're 20-year-old Mitch, and you guys go to what was the first tournaments that you remember going to?
I remember I won a Flight C 2-session open pairs event in Toronto by psyching after having a 2:30 game in the afternoon. Well, we had some ridiculous score, and I remember going to the Blue Ribbon Pairs, driving all night from Ann Arbor in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Here's some early stories. One I remember, I've qualified to play the Blue Ribbon Pairs, and my regular partner and I decided to drive through a snowstorm from Ann Arbor to Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
How far was that from Ann Arbor?
It was like driving to Tijuana. No, it was a long way. It was probably normally a 10-hour drive, but we started at 6 at night and got there around 6 in the morning. I remember our car did a 360-degree turn on the interstate and ended up in a ditch. But
did your parents know you were doing this little jaunt?
Of course not, no.
Yeah.
Then a tow truck pulled us out. We went, and I remember we had the 180 score in the first session, and then we both were half asleep, and we bombed in the second session. But that was an adventure.
180 score?
180 the first session.
So imps?
No, it was 180 match point score on a 156 average.
Oh, okay.
And then we probably had 135 or something terrible in the second session, so we didn't qualify.
So for people that don't know that type of scoring and they're thinking of percentages, what was the percentage?
We were well above average in the first session. Okay. Let's say we had 57% and probably 40 or 42% in the second session.
And then for people that are watching this, I'm over at your house. You weren't here yet. I'm hanging out with your wife, and Jody's telling me the story of her dad said that, I think it was her dad said that you abused little old ladies at the bridge club.
I don't think that was the terms. I mean, I'm not an evil person, but an impediment for me becoming a better player was I like to play poker too much at the table and try and steal from the opponents. And Jody's mom played bridge and said, I know that guy. He likes to jerk around the old ladies. So that was that came from. But that's part of when you're in your 20s or whatever, and I see this with the kids that I mentor now, you just have no fear and you're out there all the time. There's a maturation process like in any competitive game. Yeah.
You played in college and then you went to law school. Where did you go to law school?
I went to law school also at Michigan. I played a little bit less there because the work demanded it, but I still played some. My regular partner was a brilliant guy. The difference was I could stop a couple weeks before finals and then cram. He didn't have the wherewithal to do that. It took him like 6 years to get through college. He was a brilliant guy. Still is a brilliant guy.
Okay. There's a lot of people that might have played in college and then they don't continue it on.
Yeah, that's true.
You came here to Los Angeles at how old?
I was 25 when I moved to Los Angeles, and I think in part why I fell into, I love bridge and I investigated playing bridge and was playing bridge, but part of it was I had a girlfriend who lived in Ann Arbor at the time, so when she was in Ann Arbor and it was a long distance relationship, rather than me dating when I was first in Los Angeles, I would just play a lot of bridge. I got to know a lot of the local bridge players, and some people stopped playing either because their careers were all consuming or they got married or coupled or whatever. I did not have that at that time.
Who were your early mentors here in LA?
One of them was Jim Robeson, who was quite a character and an amazing guy who was opinionated, and he could be nasty in his postmortems. But I learned a lot from him. There were other people, Ifty Bakayla I've been playing with for a long time. He and I both were mentored by Robeson, and in fact I would say that Ed Davis was one of my peers at that time. They were fine players. I was friendly with most of the top players, Marshall Miles, Eddie Cantor. The one thing that stood out was that we just had a burning desire to get better, and we did.
Don't you think the top players see when somebody has a strong desire and then are more likely to mentor them, or?
I think that's hit and miss. Part of the problem, I think, in where bridge has fallen off is there hasn't been enough of that. Yes, I think that top players in a lot of cases, they will embrace young people who they see are talented, but where the game has suffered, I believe, is when the lesser players who don't necessarily have as much talent, they're not embraced in the same way, and they get frustrated because they repeatedly lose to the top players. One of the things that the American Contract Bridge League has done to address this, which is probably reasonable, is they have flighted events so that the top players can play in one division, lesser players can play in others. Everyone still has an excellent chance of success without repeatedly losing to the same people over and over again.
Having a great environment for bridge. What you've been in the bridge world now, is it 40 years?
A little more than that. Yeah, closer to 50 years, I'd say.
Okay. What do you think is different from the 70s and 80s to what we have now?
Bridge is different in that the bidding is more complicated and that the bidding is much better than it was. But I think the real difference is a societal change, whereas our parents or grandparents who grew up or survived the Depression, playing cards was entertainment and it didn't cost anything. You'd see that all over the place. As we've become a more affluent society, and as technology provides things like the internet, poker, and countless other video games, all of a sudden young people who might have played cards growing up and the natural evolution to the best card game, which is bridge, they have all these other opportunities to do different things, and I think bridge has suffered because of that, and frankly, because the people who were of a different era, let's say 10 years older than I am, or two older than that, they embraced bridge. The next generation didn't, and as a result, I think that bridge is now perceived as an old person's game. Now, you and I both mentor young players, and the young players love the game, and it's important. It's
exposure.
It's just seeing that the game is cool. The game can be cool whether you're 20 or whether you're 60. I'm a trustee of the Educational Foundation, and we funded a movie, about a documentary about 4 people who were about 30 years old who decided to take up bridge and go compete. And 2 of them really liked it, 2 were frustrated, but I remember one of them making the comment, "I hate getting beaten up by my grandparents." There's a learning curve in everything. Obviously, bridge is like that. It's like, as you get better, it's like peeling layers of an onion. But anyway, again, what we really have to overcome is that it's a game for old people. It's just a game. I think what several other people, including myself, are trying to do is to expose as many young people as possible. I think that when teaching them at high school or college age is best. And my view is that most of these people are going to go on and have careers, and they won't have time for bridge. But even though the internet just sucks everyone in, I think that there'll come a time where they're going to want the interpersonal interaction with their friends, and there'll be a game night. I think the 2 best games are bridge and Scrabble. There's no learning curve in Scrabble, but in bridge there is. And if we teach them in college, then they later can pick it up again.
There's still a learning curve in Scrabble. So before I found bridge, my husband and I played Scrabble, and if you came to our house, we would give you the 3-letter word list.
Okay.
We try to make it easier on people.
Well, we play Scrabble. We're probably average plus, but not great players. But again, relatively speaking, it's not the same kind of learning curve.
Yeah, we all know. Playing bridge, it's one of the most fascinating games.